Snow still sagged from the eaves of Stone Glen when the first song drifted down from Moonset Ridge. Aaron had been splitting cedar logs in the lean-to, mind resigned to the stinging cold, when a ribbon of sound floated through the dusk. It was unmistakably a howl, but it was like no wolf's cry he had ever heard. Notes spiraled and braided in mid-air, ascending in clean intervals, fifth upon fifth, until the whole valley hummed like a silver bowl. The wind itself paused, as though to listen. Grandmother Brenner lifted her head from the hearth and whispered, "They're early this year." Orrin wiped frost from his eyelashes. "The wolves?" "The Amethyst wolves," she corrected, fingers tightening around the ladle. "When they sing, the hinge is turning. Winter wants to open." Orrin had grown up on her stories of beasts with gemstone fur who guarded the portals between seasons, of how their voices forged keys made of sound, and of the ancient covenant that kept the wheel of the year rotating. He had believed, as children do, then half forgotten as chores and skepticism crept in. But there, reverberating down the mountainside, was the proof that myth sometimes climbs out of its cradle. That night, Orrin could not sleep. The valley shimmered with moonlight reflected off snowbanks, and the ridgeline glowed faintly violet, as though someone had scattered powdered amethyst over the spruce trees. The wolves sang again, softer, almost coaxing. A woodsplitter's common sense would have stayed indoors. Curiosity won. He dressed in layers, tucked a bone knife into his boot, more a fix for nerves than genuine defense, and slipped outside. The path to Moonset Ridge wound between drifts high as a man's chest, but a strange warmth seemed to follow him, loosening the crusted snow just enough for easy passage. Every few moments the song rippled through the forest, changing key like a flock turning in mid-flight. Orrin's breath steamed, then sparkled, tiny ice motes catching moon glare. He wondered whether the wolves shaped even the air around him. He crested the last rise. The clearing was not how he remembered it in summer. Now stood an archway of sheer ice, taller than the church steeple, etched with walls that pulsed purple from within. Snowflakes drifted upward instead of falling, swirling around the arch like reverse confetti. Before it paced three wolves. Their coats were shades of twilight grey, flecked by glints of lavender and plum. They did not merely reflect light, they seemed to be carved from translucent quartz, shot through with veins of living colour. Their eyes were the gold of early dawn, and their voices. With muzzles raised, they released a triad that rang as clearly as hammered glass. The sound condensed in front of them, coalescing into hard, luminous shapes as if music had turned to matter. A series of crystalline bars chords made visible, floated for a heartbeat, before snapping together into a long, jagged key, the width of Aaron's wrist and the length of his forearm. It hovered a moment, humming softly, then drifted toward a socket on the arch. When it slid home, the icy structure brightened. Hairline fissures lit up, the shape of a gate. Aaron's gasp betrayed him. 3 heads swung his way. He froze, palms open, knife forgotten. Fear came second to awe. He felt small, yes, but also as if he'd been expected. One wolf stepped forward, paws pressing so lightly on the snow that no prints remained. "Human child," sounded a voice, not through ears but along the inside length of Aaron's thoughts. "Why do you stray between chords?" He swallowed. Speaking aloud felt lime-clumsy. He tried shaping his answer silently. "I heard the song. I wanted to see." The wolf inclined its head. Up close, the filaments inside its pelt burned like molten geodes. "Few here beyond the crust of their season. Your tuning is unusual." Aaron felt heat rise to his cheeks. "My grandmother said you guard the portals." A second wolf, larger, moved nearer to the crystalline key humming in the threshold. "We shepherd them," it corrected gently. "Guarding implies teeth. We prefer resonance. But what is the portal for? Seasons change on their own. The first wolf's howl, coloured eyes softened. Do rivers carve beds on their own? Do stars choose to orient sailors? Nature dances, child, but someone must play the flute. She flicked her tail toward the arch. This is winter's exit, spring's gate. We unlock it with chords grown from song and silence. Oren's gaze landed on the key. Could I listen? Listen, yes. Turn? No, said the third wolf, almost wry. Mortals rarely pass whole through liminal hinges. Still, its ears twitched, curiosity is seldom accidental. Approach. Oren stepped closer. The key's surface refracted the moonlight into shifting rainbows. He felt vibrations rise through his boots, up into his chest, matching the rhythm of his heart. He reached, then hesitated. The wolves offered no objection. Fingers brushed the key. A note sang inside his bones. A above middle C, pure and steady. He had played that pitch often on his reed flute. The first wolf nodded as though confirming a calculation. Pitch memory. A useful gift. She turned back to the arch. We must complete the chord set before dawn. They began another howl, weaving harmonics deliberate and precise. Twice the melody reached for a note and faltered, like a breath catching. The wolves paused. Frost glittered in the lull. The fifth strand is brittle, murmured the second wolf. His tail rested on the snow in quiet worry. Last year's crack is widening. The first wolf faced Aaron. An imbalance in the hinge. Winter stayed too long, clung to the earth's edge, fed by human fires far south. When seasons misalign, the portal's lattice strains. We need a counter-frequency, one tinted by mortal timbre. Aaron's heart drummed. You need me to sing? Sing, hum, whistle, breathe onto us. Approvable a vibration that does not belong to us. The ask thrilled and terrified him. He lifted his flute, ever tucked inside his coat sleeve, a habit of evening wanderings, and warmed it with a breath. The mouthpiece tasted of cedar and frost. He closed his eyes, recalled the note lodged in his bones, and played. His tone joined the wolves' choir, threading underneath like river under ice. They shifted to accommodate him, shaping overtones that wrapped his melody in gauzy luminescence. He felt his lungs lose individual will, becoming bellows pumped by something older and vaster. The air brightened. Under their combined resonance, a second crystal key condensed, but this one wavered, edges shimmering like heat haze. Cracks spidered across its surface even before it fully formed. A hiss of collective dismay rippled through wolf minds. The key trembled, fractured, then burst into a spray of violet shards. Silence crashed into the clearing. The third wolf trotted forward and nosed the shards. Hollow. The word rang with grief. Aaron lowered his flute, lips numb. I failed. Not failed, said the first wolf, but incomplete. Your note is true. Something else distorts the root. A sharp gust barreled between trees, bringing with it a thready shriek not of wolf or woodwind. The air smelled suddenly of rusted snow, of ice left too long in shadow. The wolves' hackles ignited with purple flame. Frost wraith, spat the second wolf. Out from the tree line lumbered a shape of packed hoarfrost, vaguely man-shaped, hollows for eyes, an iron-blue glow in its chest. With each footfall, the ground iced over anew. The wraith opened a mouth like a cracking lake. Let winter reign, it rasped. Let the hinge freeze. Its voice was static, void of pitch, the anti-song. The wolves spread into a half-arc between the portal and the intruder. Their growls clanged like struck crystals. Arin retreated a step, but the first wolf's gaze held him fast. You carry breath and warmth, she projected. That is your shield. Vorv, born from adrenaline-filled Arin, he knew something of dissonance. A wrong note could unravel melody. Maybe a right one could undo silence. He drew a deeper breath than he ever had, and let fly a sharp ascending glissando on his flute, aiming it at the wraith. The wraith staggered as if buffeted by invisible arrows. Cracks jagged down its arms. The wolves pounced, not with teeth, but with sound, howling, short, percussive barks that hammered like chisels. The wraith reeled, pieces flaking off in powdery bursts. It shrieked, lunged toward the portal, but the wolves' sonic barrage shoved it back. Arin's lungs burned. He changed tune, launching into a melody his grandmother sang while stirring mulled wine. A spring song, all lilting thirds and playful trills. Memory flavored each note with hearth warmth. The wraith shriveled under the cascade of tones, core light blinking. One final howl from the wolves, crystalline and guttural, struck the creature like a bell crack. It shattered, dissolving into grains that the wind whisked away. Moonlight returned to normal brightness. The trees exhaled gusts of fragrant spruce as though bracing back to life. The first wolf approached Arin. Your song held warmth against the knoll. We thank you. He bent to catch his breath. Is the portal safe? Safer, she said, though caution still shone in her eyes. Yet the lattice needs mending. The key we tried to forge failed because frost had already seeped into its root. We require something neither holy wolf nor holy winter, something born of alliance. She nudged one of the violet shards with her nose. It rang softly. Take a piece. Arin picked up the shard. It weighed nearly nothing and glowed dimly, as though remembering music. What do I do with it? Fuse it with your breath. Shape, a hybrid key? His fingers trembled. He seated the shard in the crook of his flute's mouthpiece. It fit as if carved for the spot. A lilac pulse flowed into the wood, turning its tawny color to dusky lavender. Play, whispered the wolf. Arin closed his eyes again. Images surfaced, sunlit puddles, crocus shoots piercing thawing ground, lambs wobbling on new legs. He wove these pictures into sound, a simple progression, major, resolute. The modified flute amplified, notes ringing like morning bells. But more remarkable, his breath condensed at the instrument's end into visible filaments of sound, curling around the flute before spiraling outward. They gathered above his head, knitting a latticework of glassy bars tinted violet and pale gold. The wolves raised their own voices, harmonizing carefully, selecting partials that complemented his mortal frequency. The lattice elongated, took on the unmistakable form of a key-slender neck, flared bow, intricate teeth shaped like budding branches. It gleamed opalescent, half amethyst, half dawn. Sweat cooled on Arin's temples, though the air remained frigid. As the final chord faded, the key floated to his hand, warm as bread. The wolves stepped aside, leaving the socket empty and expectant. Heart battering, Arin guided the key toward the arch. It hesitated, aligning itself, then sank inward. A soft chime spread across the clearing. Light poured from the fissures, not pure white, but a gradient shifting from snow blue to meadow green. The gate brightened until its edges blurred, like ice turning to water. A breeze smelling of wet earth drifted through. Somewhere beyond, he heard frogs croak. The wolves bowed their heads, ears folded in reverence. The hinge turns. Spring arrives. All around the clearing, snow began to melt in spirals, revealing moss and the promise of sleeping ferns. Nightingales, absent for months, trilled timidly. Arin stared through the portal. He glimpsed rolling hills under gauzy sunshine, rivers freed from frost, petals drifting like confetti. For one mad moment he wanted to step through, to stand amid that promised warmth. But the wolf's presence reminded him of something Grandmother Brenner often said. Seasons belong to all creatures. None may hoard them. He backed away. The wolves watched with approving eyes. "You chose balance," said the first wolf. "Therefore you may keep memory rather than consequence." Orin smiled shakily. "I'll remember, yes. Though no one in Stone Glen will believe." "Tell them anyway," the second wolf advised. "Stories prime ears for music they have not yet heard." The first wolf added, "And when next you hear us sing, bring your flute. The hinge needs many tunings." He nodded. "What about the shards?" The third wolf swept the remaining pieces of the broken key into a pawful. "We'll see them where crocuses bloom. From the fractures new crystals grow, tuned now by alliance." Above them the sky lightened. Dawn's earliest lavender smudged the east. The portal shimmered faintly, then the arch of ice cracked along natural seams, collapsing into harmless snow that hissed against budding grass. The key had done its job. The doorway was no longer needed until the next transition. Arin felt exhaustion hit like a belated wave. The wolves pressed noses to his palms, cool, firm, grounding. "What shall I call you?" he asked on a sudden impulse. The first wolf considered. "Call us by what we are to you, so the word remains yours. We are Crystal Cord, we are Threshold Howl, we are Amethyst Shepherd. Choose." Arin thought of the hush when the key slotted home, the music that had knit fur and breath and human hope. "I'll call you Resonance." A pleased shiver rippled through the wolf's pelts. "Then Resonant One," the lead wolf said. "Walk well between seasons." They turned as one and melted into the tree line, bodies dissolving into morning mist made violet by fresh sun. Arin staggered back down the ridge, feet soaking where snow had turned to slush. He reached home after the roosters but before the work bells. Grandmother Brenner sat on the porch, shawl wrapped tight, gaze fixed on the thawing fields. "You saw them," she said simply. Arin sank onto the step beside her. "And heard them. And played for them." She patted his hand, smiled without surprise. "Then the wheel is safe a while longer." They watched as first sprouts of green poked through soil still trembling from ice's retreat. Somewhere up the ridge, faint but certain, a chord of 3 wolf voices unfurled across the brightening sky. Testing, tuning, promising. That evening, Erin told the village children everything about the Amethyst wolves, the portal of ice, the wraith of unseasonable cold, and the key woven from breath and gemstone. Most wide eyes glowed with wonder. A few skeptics scoffed. Yet when those skeptics stepped outside, they paused, ears cocked, uncertain whether the wind carried something more than mere breeze. And so a new generation learned to listen. Through the weeks, whenever Erin hefted his flute, the embedded shard thrummed, faint but receptive, reminding him that music could become matter, that seasons moved on coaxed hinges, and that he, a woodsman's grandson, now carried a responsibility as delicate as fresh petals. Spring deepened, then yielded to summer. Grain ripened. Bees rummaged through poppies, across distant mountains. Another portal likely waited, where amethyst wolves in sapphire coats prepared a key that would usher autumn's russet breath. Perhaps one day he would be summoned there as well, flute ready, lungs filled with stories. For now, he planted crocus bulbs around Stone Glen, tucking a sliver of violet crystal beside each. When the first frosts returned, the blossoms would remember spring's song even as winter reclaimed the hills, and their silent colour would reassure all who had ears. The wolves were singing, the hinge was turning, and balance, fragile, precious, was being kept. Arin often stood at dusk, eyes on Moonset Ridge, breath fogging in the cooling air. Once, twice, 3 times a season, he still heard the shimmering howls, notes so pure they refracted stars. Each time he wrapped both hands around his flute, felt the amethyst warm against his pulse, and answered with a chord of his own, sending it soaring to join theirs, a promise exchanged in harmonic light. And somewhere beyond sight, Resonance listened and smiled, their paws guarding futures spun from crystal cords, their howls forging keys invisible but indestructible, turning the world from what was to what would be. Cycle after luminous cycle.